He was born in the same fiercely independent Basque country of northern Spain that had produced Ignatius Loyola and Francis Xavier more than 4 centuries earlier. Pedro is the youngest of 5 children. His mother dies when he is 10, his father 8 years later. At the early age of 15, he leaves home to enter medical school at the University of Madrid. In his first year, he wins the top prize in anatomy, the first of many awards. He is on his way to finishing medical school in the top tier of his class when he accepts an invitation to visit the Marian Shrine of Lourdes as a member of a commission responsible for attesting or not attesting to the validity of miraculous claims.
For me, Lourdes is a city of miracles. I stayed there for some 3 months. I was thus the witness of 3 miraculous cures from the very moment they took place, in the midst of the faithful who were praying to the Virgin Mary, and then on through the medical verification that was carried out by doctors who were atheists. This impressed me very much, because I had often heard my professors in Madrid, who also were atheists, speak of the superstitions of Lourdes. There was born my vocation.
In Belgium, then in the Netherlands. After being ordained a priest, he continues his theological and spiritual training in the United States. It is now 1938, at the brink of World War II, when he is unexpectedly assigned to become a missionary in Japan. Already multilingual, Arrupe dives into his study of Japanese and a lifelong mission of intercultural understanding.
I must say that at the time, I did not focus on the transcendent aspect of the missionary experience, but rather on certain negative personal aspects, the discovery of a reality different from what I expected, and above all, the feeling of loneliness. And I experienced an even greater loneliness when I went to Ubi, 21 hours by train from Tokyo, for my first mission assignment, although I spoke Japanese only very poorly. Another important personal event was my imprisonment for 1 month in Yamaguchi. Japan was at war and I was suspected of espionage. I spent days and nights in the December cold, entirely alone. Many were the things I learned during this time. The science of silence, of solitude, of severe and austere poverty, of inner dialogue with the guest of my soul.
When later he was made the director of novices, these were all Japanese with some Koreans, for this Westerner to deal with somebody from a completely different culture was very difficult, but he had made it a point to try to get inside the culture so he could really talk to these people, and he was good at it. In fact, he ended up writing about 6 books in Japanese on the spiritual exercises. Jesuits who are elected in their own province to go to the big meeting in Rome.
Immersed in the spirit of the Second Vatican Council, Jesuits face their own challenges of change. Priorities need to be examined. Commitment to justice rises for special consideration. On the 3rd ballot, the General Congregation elects Pedro Arrupe to be their Superior General on May 22, 1965, and goes on to pass wide-ranging reforms. Arrupe will be thrust unprepared into leadership that requires him to transform the ranks of nearly 30,000 Jesuits to address a new world order.
Father Arrupe's first official words as general were a quotation from Jeremiah. I don't know how to speak. And it sounds strange, this is a man fluent in 7 languages. But when you read through the rest of the quotation, you realize that Pedro Arrupe is saying that he really doesn't know how to speak, but the Lord will talk for him, and the Lord will teach him how to speak. And he certainly did. He was a very articulate spokesman throughout his whole life. The heart and soul of that message was his basic option did not oppose the church to the world, but rather it considered the church in the world.
The message of spiritually engaging the world promoted by John the 23rd and the Second Vatican Council, as well as by the Jesuit General Congregation, would nevertheless prove to be a challenge for Pedro Arrupe. The message of spiritually engaging the world promoted by John the 23rd and the Second Vatican Council, as well as by the Jesuit General Congregation, would nevertheless prove to be a challenge for Pedro Arrupe.
I accepted what the society gives to me, electing me as general, and the first thing to come to my mind is a big cross. That is, I think I was bound to suffer in the rest of my life very much, because I suppose always a general has to suffer. But in this condition of the church, I think it's something special. It has tremendous changes, so many affections, so many problems, so much insecurity. But it's another aspect of to be a general, who is the source of great joy. And that is to have the possibility of knowing the society and the Jesuits from inside.
Arrupe will turn out to be an apt advocate of adaptation
to the Philippines. They had a special prisoner of war camp for religious.
Yeah.
And food was very short. The local villagers got to hear about it. They smuggled in food. Court reported the commandant, who happened to be a Catholic. He said, turn a blind eye, otherwise people will starve.
Yeah.
He was reported to headquarters, sent to the front line, and was killed. Now, one of the Jesuits in the camp decided to track down this man's family. So he made all sorts of inquiries, wasn't getting anywhere, and the provincial of Japan invested in a fleet of taxis, and taxi drivers are great gossips. And he put out this word. He got an address in Rome. He went to the address. It was a convent. The wife of the commander had become a nun. She never knew about her husband, how he died really for others. He died in disgrace, and just able to tell him the real story. And he said, have you got a son? Have you got any children? He has one son. Where is he? The National Seminary, about to be ordained a priest. Now, the spin-off from that is the provincial had invested in a fleet of taxis. The general in Rome didn't like the idea. So he sent out a special man with all sorts of powers to investigate the provincial, everything he was doing. He'd worked for 2 years. The report was never presented. By the time it was ready, the provincial Japan had become the general of the Jesuits. Mentor had a very good assistant, Champvini O'Keefe, who was an American Jesuit. He was excellent.
Yeah. And did they go anywhere together or do anything? Was there a specific role that he played in his life?
He was called the Vicar General of the Jesuits. So whenever Pedro would make his retreat or something, this chap would take over.
Yeah.
And when Pedro had his stroke, this chap took over.
Yeah.
And then the Pope wiped him and put in his own man.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, I suppose in education, he coined the phrase "men for others" to the alumni in Spain, and he told them, you've been privileged, now do something about it, feedback what you receive back into the community.
Yeah.
So he made a very strong point with education.
Is this when he was in Japan?
No, this is when he was general.
Oh, just when he was general.
Yeah. And he was emphasising the poor, and also he wanted us, where was the need was not being filled,
yeah.
He wanted us to be there, and he set up the Jesuit Refugee Service, because no one was really with the refugees at that stage. It was the last thing he did, before he had his stroke.
Yeah.
His favourite places, well, he said, when he was a medical student in Lourdes, he saw a miracle right in front of him.
Oh, okay. Do you know what that was?
It was a little boy who had paralysis, all contorted.
Yeah.
And Pedro, His father had died, so the family went to Lewis after to recover, as it were.
Yeah.
And when the priest was blessing the sick, in front of Pedro was a little boy who was contorted with paralysis.
Yeah.
When he was blessed, he suddenly stood up and was cured. Pedro asked to see the files.
Yeah.
As a medical student, he had access to them.
Yeah.
He saw all about it, and then he gave up medicine and became a Jesuit. So one of his places was Lourdes, of St. Ignatius in Rome.
Yeah.
Every year he would spend 3 days there getting ready for the Feast of St. Ignatius, his rooms. So he had a great devotion to Ignatius.
Yeah.
Ignatius would have been a mentor. He really absorbed the whole things of Ignatius.
Did he also look up to the aspects of St. Francis at all?
Oh, is it Francis Xavier?
Yeah, St. Francis Xavier, yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it was his sort of his zeal. He wanted to sacrifice everything for Jesus.
Yeah.
He wanted to burn out, not to rust out.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible.
There when the bomb went off.
Yeah.
And he, with his medical studies, he organised bringing people. He turned the Bishop of the Jesuit house into a hospital. And he talks about another determining motive in his life was, in those days you said Mass with your back to the people. Okay. Then he turned around to say, the Lord be with you. And he saw this mass of people all terribly burnt and everything. He said, he just froze.
Yeah.
He said, how can we treat people like this? So that was a turning moment, I think, for the poor, the oppressed, the suffering. Yeah. He said, we can't be comfortable, we've got to do something about this.
Yeah.
The other thing too was when he was in Japan, as an alien, he was put in solitary confinement for a month. And he found that very difficult, but it was really, I think, another determining moment in his life where he just felt the need for Jesus.
And
foreigners, so they were just was overcautious, I think. Well, he writes about it. He found it very self-emptying. He felt very much close to Jesus, who emptied himself for us, and he felt as having a similar experience. He just lost everything, he just sort of confined, just nothing except Jesus. And he felt it was a privilege to be having a similar, in the inverted commas, similar experience to Jesus.
Yeah.
Got a beautiful prayer about when he was being resigned as Jesuit, as general. He had this stroke, and he says that all my life I wanted to give my life to Jesus. Now that it's happening, it's a very different experience. The initiative is completely his, not mine. Yeah. I find myself completely in the hands of God. So that was a very moving prayer he made when he handed over. That's it. No matter I can tell this story. I was in Rome with a movement called the Christianized Communities. Yeah. I was sort of world chaplain in a way. And the chaplain in 1910 was a chap, Jorge Bergoglio, Maria Bergoglio. And there were problems down there, so we asked him to sort them out. And he didn't quite do it, so we sacked him.
And how long ago was that?
Oh, that would have been in the 80s.
In the 80s.
So I sacked the Pope.
Wow.
I met him in 1973. There was a meeting of provincials in India, and no, I beg your pardon. He visited Australia in it would have been about 1970. I think he visited Australia, and he said Mass here, and that's when I first met him. Yeah. And he was just so positive, he was just full of life, Yeah. So then there was a meeting in Rome, which I was invited to in 1972. He was there. On the way to India, I visited Brother Andrew, Mother Teresa's. You got Mother Teresa, Brother Andrew was in charge of the young man, so he took me to meet Mother Teresa. Yeah. We were talking across the table. She said to me, "Are you reading my palm?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I do not believe in that." The next week I was in Rome with Pedro, he's talking away, and I said, "Father, can I read your palm? Tell me all about myself." I had such a different response. Yeah. So I said, "By the look of your palm, you're rather fond of prayer." He laughed. Well, I used to.